Greetings everyone and welcome back. Today's talk will be talking about two things specifically. We'll be talking about the recently published ICASA regulations as well as some of the SARS requirements for community broadcasters. Now, the recently published ICASA regulations on community broadcasters, I think they were made public last year in 2017. And as of 2018, ICASA is using those regulations to regulate community broadcasters in South Africa. Now, I want to speak about three things in particular that comes out of those regulations. One is the local content quotas, that is a requirement. Secondly, we're going to talk about the segregation of responsibilities and duties within a radio station, as well as the last thing that we will be looking at is need, demand, and support at the radio stations. Now, when it comes to the first issue on the local content quotas, the local content quotas has actually been increased. So the requirement by the regulator is that all the community broadcasters should play more local content. And local content in this case means that it is music that is produced in South Africa or any other piece of artwork that is of a South African production. So a lot of radio stations have been able to play local music in whatever genre that they're actually playing. However, there are some stations who argue very strongly that because of the format of their radio stations, they will not be able to meet these increased local content quotas. The regulator is quite amenable to a conversation between yourself and the regulator around what is it that you require the regulator to look at with regards to your specific radio station, if your station has got specific needs that the regulator has to look at. It's important that the radio station must engage with the regulator as soon as it realizes that it's not able to meet its local content quotas. Whereas for the rest of the industry where local content quotas are quite easy for you to meet, you are happily able to do it. You can even go as far as 90% as the SABC once did at some point. You really make the regulator quite happy for that. The second issue that we want to look at is that there is a segregation of duties and responsibilities. In many stations, you find that board members are also acting as managers, they're also acting as presenters on the radio station. Now, the regulator is frowning on these matters. They are saying it cannot happen because there's blurring of responsibilities, and these often than not are the source of conflict in many of our radio stations, community stations that is. So if you decide to become a board member, you get elected as a board member, you then cannot have a role as a manager of the station, or you can't even have a role as a presenter at the radio station. The same will go if you are in a management position in the radio station. You cannot be a board member. You can't take on a governance responsibility. And you also cannot be a presenter. So gone are the days where program managers, station managers, marketing managers, all are presenters at the radio stations, or even the presenter is a board member. That cannot happen anymore. We have to ensure that the responsibilities are segregated quite clearly so that there is very clear lines from a management perspective and responsibilities and accountability. So it's going to take some time from radio stations to actually change this culture. We understand that, but it's important that you need to get your systems aligned to the new regulatory requirements. Because if you're not going to do that, the regulator would not be happy with you at all. Now, the last matter that we've got to look at is the need, demand, and support. Many stations have not been able to demonstrate the support that they've got in their communities, and they've not been able to demonstrate the kind of a demand for the radio station. The licenses are there, but the stations are not necessarily supported by many people. So the regulator is going to be going through a very fine-tooth comb for you to be able to demonstrate that there is a need for the service. Because what has happened in the past that frequencies have been issued to many radio stations, but the regulator is not happy that there is indeed the demand for such a service. As a result, we find that the regulator has issued more than one license in one catchment area, and many stations are not being able to survive and they're not commercially viable. So we've got to have a clear look at that. The last point we want to look at is the SARS compliance, the South African Revenue Services. Many stations have not been able to comply sufficiently with SARS. In other words, you don't have a tax clearance certificate, you don't pay your pay as you earn, as well as you're not paying your VAT. Many are registered as a VAT vendor, or at times if you're not registered as a VAT vendor, you're actually trading above the threshold. So you must understand what the VAT requirements really are, what the tax requirements really are, and ensure that you engage with SARS immediately and get your tax affairs sorted. Because SARS is aware now that a lot of stations are not complying, but there's a lot of revenue that flows through the radio stations, and stations have an obligation, a duty to comply with the SARS requirements. So it's important that as a sector we need to pull these things together and comply. So the biggest theme of this episode is make sure that you comply with both the regulator as well as SARS. So it's very, very important for us to keep those things at the back of our mind. So until we have another conversation in the next episode, till next time, thank you and goodbye.